Oh, hello. It's BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank. Sean Fitz with us. Nate Bauer joining us shortly as we've got a lot of things to talk about on the show today, including your thoughts and comments. The chat's already hot today. We're talking about Drew Allar and his desire to run the football, his outlook for 2024. We're also going to be talking about Nick Dawkins and the conversations that Blue White Illustrated had with those players. That's coming up on the show today, but the BWI Mailbag, as always, is the feature of our Tuesday conversation, especially in the offseason. So if you've got any thoughts, any questions, put them in the chat today. We'll be getting to the best ones at the end of the show. And I want to introduce our guest, Sean Fitz, publisher of Blue White Illustrated, back from the beach. How you doing? Are you rested and ready to go?
Yeah. Came home with, a stomach virus for my kids. That's always fun, just wrapping up vacation like that. But no, we're good. I got a nice little tanny glow to myself. I see we're an international sensation, judging by the chat here. People checking in from the Philippines and all over the world. So welcome to everybody. Charlie, there you go. Very cool. My grandfather was in the Philippines in World War II, so I've always wanted to get out there. I think it's going to be. We continue to talk Penn State. It is a very busy time of year. We're heading into July 4th. It's kind of that back end of the wave of commitments that we expect in June. Going to go in July. I'm going to talk recruiting here in a little bit, but boy, we sure are busy, aren't we?
We certainly are. And there's going to be more decisions to come during that portion of July, as Fitz is going to get to here in a second. But I want you to introduce the other member of the show, Nate Bauer, senior editor, Blue White Illustrated. We're going to be talking about some of his conversations with the important people at Penn State. If you did not catch it, the full interview with Pat Kraft went up yesterday here on the channel. I strongly encourage you to check that out. Nate, just quickly, any final recap of thoughts about what you talked about with Pat Kraft yesterday?
There's a lot going on. Yeah, there's a lot going on. It's worth checking out. There's whiteout takes, there's Beaver Stadium takes, there's NIL takes. Right? He's a guy that has a lot on his plate. So, check it out.
We'll get to some of those conversations in just a second, but as we said, recruiting dominates the conversation this time of year, and there's a lot to get to from last week and upcoming. There's some news that came out yesterday already in the chat. We're getting to all of that on Fitz's recruiting update. Nate's taking a quick break, so Fitz, jump right in. Tell us what's going on with recruiting over the last couple of days.
Well, it's that summer roller coaster, and I think we just hit a dip yesterday. Penn State missed out. Matthew Outten, Brent Pry took him at Virginia Tech. That's a really good get for Brent Pry. This was not a situation where Penn State looked elsewhere or anything like that. They flat out got beat for Matthew Outten. But part of me romanticizes about recruiting, how it was, and this is a Virginia kid going to Virginia Tech, so good for him. I think he's a really talented player. I think he's going to be really exciting in Tyler Bowen's offense and what they're able to do down there. But that's a sting for Penn State, because that's one they thought they were, pretty well in on. It was actually pretty funny to me. Penn State thought they were battling Maryland. Maryland thought they were battling Penn State. Virginia Tech won out. So this is not a situation that you felt NIL was like overwhelming or anything like that. This is a situation where I think he found what he thought was his best fit. He's Virginia kid going to play at Virginia Tech. And again, really good get for Brent Pye. And, Penn State's got to pivot there. They still got targets out there at wide receiver. Of course, I think the top two everybody looks at as Lex Cyrus and Taz Williams have sort of bubbled up to the top. I know Samari Reed's supposed to announce tomorrow, and there's a couple other guys that are in that atmosphere there. But those are the guys that we're looking at for receiver right there.
Can I go back to Outten just for 1 second? Because this is a conversation. You say that about Penn State thinking it's Maryland thinking it's Penn State, and then suddenly it's Virginia Tech. Is this a case of the player being so opaque in his recruiting process where he doesn't talk to anybody, or is there some other miscommunication there among the people involved?
Yeah, I think it's the former. If you followed our stuff with Matthew Outten, our consistent theme was not really sure what he's thinking, because he's very quiet, didn't talk to us, doesn't talk to a lot of coaches or anything like that, kind of handled it all on his own. So I think that's really where you get that read. Again, it was just very funny that both those schools thought they were going heads up against each other, and then it turned out to be the third one. So no, it's not sad that you lose a player to Virginia Tech. There's a Virginia guy. He's a guy that honestly Brent Pry came in with the same sort of initial statement that James Franklin did in Virginia. He said they got to lock down Virginia. Penn State really rated Virginia when Justin Fuente was there. Justin Fuente did a bad job, left a bad roster. For Brent to be in the situation that he is, like keeping his head above water right now, considering what they had, is pretty good. And I'm not sure how they're going to be this year, but at least there's something to sell there. There's a turnaround that you can sell there, and I think Matthew Outten saw that and thought that he could be a featured player in that. I also think that location is tricky with Virginia Tech because they've had such an amazing run of Virginia Tidewater players, and then you pull out a map, it's nowhere close. Like, it's not easy to get to. I mean, we talk about a state college being out in the middle of nowhere. Blacksburg faces some similar things, and they have to bring that back around. I know this is not a Virginia Tech show, but they have to bring that pull back to the Tidewater area with Michael Vick and all those guys. Had a ton of success there. So I think that it's a feather in the cap for Brent Pry to go out and win this one back. And it's another gut punch for Penn State in this 2025 cycle.
I won't bring up Peyton Falzone then, if we're not going to be diving into the Virginia Tech conversation. Do you want to go with other misses that are important from last week, or do you want to move on to Penn State's committed players?
We can do Falzone. I mean, it's not rocket science there, right? Like, Virginia Tech is going to give him a chance to play quarterback. Penn State wants him as a tight end. You're a 16, 17-year-old kid. What are you picking there? Obviously. Right. So, I mean, we saw this with Tyler Warren years ago. I don't know how Peyton is going to, bubble up as a Division I, like, legitimate Power 4 conference quarterback, but, he's athletic enough to do a lot of things. And we're going to keep watching that just in case. But it's just an interesting sort of juxtaposition how it went exactly like Tyler Warren's went, because Tyler was a quarterback at one point. He thought he was going to play quarterback at Virginia Tech. Yeah. He wasn't good enough. We're going to see if Peyton Falzone where he lands, because you give a kid a chance to play the position he wants versus a chance to play the position he's never played, but probably will end up being successful at. I mean, what are you going to do in that situation? So, suffice to call it a loss, but it's sort of an apples and oranges comparison right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Where was our next topic? Where were we going again?
I was going to let you pick if you wanted to talk about some of the other misses in that last week, or if you wanted to dive right into the recruiting wins.
Let's dive into the recruiting wins. We just we dialed it back there for a little bit. Let's go back into the recruiting wins. Of course, the last time I talked to you guys was the morning that Troy Huhn committed, 2026 quarterback from California. This is a guy we've been watching. We put our picks in last week, and the dominoes have fallen to Penn State. This is it's been interesting to watch with Dia Bell, with Brady Hart, with Faison Brandon, with Troy Huhn. Those were the four that we identified. I know there's other guys with check marks by their names, but those were the four that Penn State really identified. Huhn found himself in a situation where he really liked Michigan. He really liked Penn State. Those were kind of his top two. And then all of a sudden, another guy, Brady Hart, whose top two we heard was Penn State and Michigan as well, committed to Michigan. Well, domino, there you go. Penn State has a quarterback in 2026. Again, some things to clean up in his delivery, but one of the best. I mean, we're going to play the drinking game where you say arm talent and you take a drink, because that's what football. I'm excited to see what he's able to do as he continues to mature. They asked him to do I don't know, T. Frank, you've watched some full games. How much have they asked him to do compared to what they're going to ask him at the college level?
Yeah, so I haven't dug into that. I apologize. I haven't dug into that specifically, trying to get through the 25 guys.
Asking a question you're not prepared for. Interesting.
My main thing is that I like some of the baseline stuff he has from that delivery perspective and the arm strength. When he wants to put some mustard on the football, I think there are some times where he needs to correct some overstriding and getting everything back in line. But I apologize from that particular perspective of reading coverages. There's a lot of RPOs that you see there on the film, so that is part of Andy Kolinke's offense. I see why they like him, but also those are things that translate on a very specific level. They don't have the next level secondary progression read sort of thing.
Good. I got one of those in there. So, also missed Jayden Woods, defensive end from Kansas. I know you watched him a little bit this week. Really athletic kid. Maybe not the biggest frame in the world, about 6'3 plus 215. He's going to continue to get bigger, but you like the athletic profile that he puts together. Someone put out a 40-inch vertical or something like that. I can't verify that and know that's true or anything like that, but it's a lot to look at. He's got a lot of burst off the edge. And if you look at what Penn State's doing, the success that they've had at defensive end, of course, got Max Granville. Now you add Jayden Woods to the mix. All of a sudden, that group where we thought, hey, what's going to happen on the defensive line? You're trying to think, oh, well, who do they have to tap the brakes on now? And how's this going to affect Deshaun Burnett? And how's this going to affect some other guys in that sort of role right there? So a nice little turnaround for Dion Barnes. And Jayden Woods, a good pickup for Penn State. And I'll go right into Jeff Exinor. Jeff Exinor committed to Penn State midweek last week, announced on Friday night. Just my little off-kilter spiel here. The Friday night commitment is kind of the worst in terms of branding, in terms of like reach and things like that. Not a lot of people on the internet at Friday night. I'm going to say the same for July 4th, just in case anyone is listening. But Jeff Exinor, again, he was one of my top 5 receivers when we did that list a couple of weeks ago. This is a guy, it's physical. I'm very curious to see where he's at from a physical athletic perspective 2 years into the program, because he's already got the size. He's got the athleticism. I love that 4.3 shuttle that he's put together at 217 pounds. That's moving. That is a really, really positive number right there. So I'm excited to see what he's able to put together. On the flip side, Brandon Finney, his teammate, we thought was coming to Penn State. He's now going to Oregon. There's been a theme in college football recruiting in the last couple of weeks, and that is Oregon is they mean it. They did this to Penn State. They did this to Ohio State. They got Dorian Brew. They did this to Texas. They're not just messing with underlings here. They're taking on some of the biggest programs in the country, and they're winning. They have a lot of capital to back that up. They are doing some things that other programs can't do, and they are winning recruiting battles because of it. Is it the right strategy? I don't know, but we're going to see what happens with guys like Brandon Finney and as they get closer to National Signing Day. But man, Oregon is not to be trifled with right now.
Yeah, that was something we covered last week, and it's a pretty clear trend in football right now that there are certain situations where NIL is absolutely part of the conversation. It is something that is going to be a part for as long as the current situation continues. So let's get into what I think a lot of people want to know about, which is the next phase in recruiting. Everyone loves, okay, as soon as a recruit comes on board, it's what's next? What's next? What's next? Keep the party going. So the remaining recruits that you're focused on for this first week of July, and then heading into the second week of July, which I know there's a couple guys in that particular situation.
Would they go 5 straight days with a commit last week or something like that? And then the 6th day, we're like, hey guys, what's wrong? What's going on? Again, math.
Thursday's quiet. What's going on?
Math does not work like that. You've got roughly 25 commits in this cycle, 365 days. Do a little division. 5 and 5 days is nice. It's fun, but it leaves something open on the back end there. But there's still stuff left out there. 20 commits right now, and you look at what they still need, and you think of that 25 ballpark number, and it's very much a ballpark number. The 85 is what they're up against, but also we've talked about that number really doesn't matter anymore. So the number's a lot looser than they used to be. They'll figure that out. They've got creative math geniuses on the staff, whatever. But receiver, a big need right there. Lex Cyrus and Taz Williams, the two that I'm looking at heaviest right now. I think we're going to see a decision from Lex Cyrus this week. I think that decision is still yet to be made. It's probably closer than many would think, especially coming out of that official visit from Penn State the first weekend of June. We thought, he was ready to get going. But that wasn't the case. South Carolina is still in there as well for the speedster from Susquehanna Township. Taz Williams is a guy that, you just keep looking at the feedback, and Penn State seems to just keep growing on this one. Michigan has gotten some other guys. Andrew Marsh was a big key for Michigan, and then all of a sudden you pivot away from that. Texas A&M might be in the same situation, so now SMU back in the picture. So all these schools coming in, but I think Penn State has done a really good job of being the consistent, hey, we want you, we want you, we want you. And I think there's some other receivers on the board, probably a little bit below Taz Williams here, but like Taz is kind of the guy that they're feeling pretty good about right now. I would say, I think July 13th is his commitment date. So it'll be a couple of weeks before we know how these things shake out. But yeah, with Outten off the board, it's closing time. I mean, this is a big stretch for Marcus Hagans and for James Franklin and these guys, because I mean, how many more of these body blows can you sustain? Lex Cyrus goes elsewhere. That's a bad look. If Taz Williams, with what we know about his recruitment, would end up elsewhere, that's a bad look. So got to continue, got to get back on that track. I think they can do it, but I don't think it's a sure thing.
Yeah. So a blow to not have Matthew Outten. I wrote earlier this week, I think hours before he committed, what's an ideal class of the remaining recruits? And I think ideally you get 5 guys, and you want guys with high upside, including Lex Cyrus and Matthew Outten. If they miss on both of those guys, then the conversation and honestly the perception of Penn State's wide receiver room and recruiting, that continues. That's a hard road to hoe if you continue to have that particular perception of receivers don't go to Penn State. So as much as you might win 1 or 2 of these, it feels like, you always say there are no must-get recruits, but this receiver position, it has to start improving at some point. It has to start, the trend has to continue forward instead of being stagnant at some point.
Yeah, and I think they will. Like, I think that there's been a lot of turnover this offseason. I think that's helped. I think that's gotten guys that can get to the level that they're capable of getting to. They're not afraid to take that step. And it felt like last year, given what was in the room, some others were afraid to take that step. And I'm excited to see how that goes. Of course, I'm a hopeful guy. I'm an optimistic guy. I want to see it happen, especially with the guys that they have on campus. I think there's a bunch of good kids in that room. It's just a matter of taking that next step, being those alpha dogs and getting up there. Can they do it? I think they're capable of doing it. But again, we keep saying athleticism is not the issue. Talent's not the issue. At some point, that stuff has to come to the surface. So that's where I'm at with that.
This is the BWI Live Show. I'm Thomas Francard. That is Sean Fitz. We talk about Penn State football on this show, but with recruiting being such a big conversation during this time of the year, we love to get these recruiting updates, but we got to get into the Penn State news, got to get into the conversations that matter about the team for the upcoming season. It is season preview time. July, the training camp is just around the corner. It is this month, at the end of this month, where things get going. So, first off, subscribe to Blue White Illustrated here on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe over at the website, code PSU1, 2 months for $1, so you can get access to all of these exclusive interviews. Nate Bauer has talked to literally every important person that exists over in the athletic administration office, and of course, the football team with James Franklin, all the coordinators, Drew Allar. We're going to get into that conversation here with Nate as a part of his ongoing series for our season preview magazine. Nate, you have, I wanted to talk about Andy Cole, Nicky, and your conversation with the coordinators, but then you talk to Drew Allar, and all of a sudden that becomes the thing we need to discuss. So
sure.
The first article of, I think, a couple is up at bluewhiteillustrated.com right now. I'm going to, after the show, put the link in the description of the video, but give me your overarching impression of your latest interaction with Penn State starting quarterback.
Oh boy. He's ready, right? He's the guy, right? He's Penn State's quarterback. I think that he learned quite a bit from last year. I think that, and this is, I don't know. Look, you go into these things with angles, maybe, right? Just some floater kind of, hey, maybe the conversation will take us to this place. At least that's my approach to quite a bit of interviews. And with Drew, I have a little bit of a suspicion that people don't really have any idea who this guy is as a person, right? Really nice kid. Do you know what kind of music he listens to? Do you know what favorite
No, I don't.
foods are? Like, I don't have a great idea about who he is as a person. And I asked him about that, and not necessarily so that he would tell me who he is, because I don't think that that's going to happen in 10 minutes, but more so his comfort level with being this shiny object that Penn State
Being in the
fans,
spotlight.
yeah, are have a lot of interest in, but also simultaneously don't really know who he is. And he was like, yeah, he's totally comfortable with it. He's okay with that. He thinks that that's generally kind of what happens in college football to begin with. Is you've got these players under helmets that you don't see their faces. They are player X in your college football 25 video game, right? That's kind of who these people, what purpose they serve. But I do think that there is some interesting dynamic that has to be figured out for Penn State football in terms of his ability to lead this football team. I'm being diplomatic about that, but when I asked him straight up whether or not he should be a captain, your junior quarterback, who is a starter and second team preseason All Big Ten, right? According to
a guy that was groomed for the position his freshman season, where they shoehorned him into a lot of games to get him experience.
Yeah. So this is that guy, and this is the year for that guy.
Yeah.
And his response was, I don't want to tell my teammates who to vote for, and I don't want to, right? He's a very humble. He has humility. That is a huge part of who he is. But I do think that that's a big stride that he is trying to take, that the program wants him to take, and that Penn State football absolutely needs from him personally, within the next 5 months. It has to happen.
Can I break in here and tell you the most shocking thing that I thought I'd never hear from anybody at Penn State about a player? And it was about Drew this offseason. And someone told me they wish he had more McGloin to him. And I could not believe that. But that is what they're trying to instill in him this offseason.
I didn't think that.
I mean,
of all the quarterbacks, I was not prepared for that one. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say it's a challenging subject to wrap your head around, because how are you going to, and this includes me, this includes you guys, how are you going to belittle a kid or criticize a kid for being too nice and for being super humble, right? Like,
how are you going to neg him into being more of that guy?
Yeah, you can't
just browbeat him into being more aggressive. That doesn't seem like that works for somebody who isn't naturally aggressive socially.
I just think that everybody has their own style, and his is one that he is comfortable with, and one that I think that they've worked with him on that, and they have tried to take strides there. And I think that he's taken strides there. I think that he acknowledges that the word that he used was, in the spring, he tried to have more of an edge to him. He's not going to, and he said this, he's not going to scream and yell and cuss guys out. It's not going to happen. That's not the player that he is. It's not the teammate that he is. But you just wonder, as this has gone on, and maybe I'm turning this into a bigger story than it needs to be, or than it really is. But yeah, I do have some questions about leadership for this football team going into the season, and where it's coming from, and how strong it is and will be.
Is that something, Fitz, you think they can overcome? Just from a big picture perspective of, even if he gets halfway there, but it isn't fully the guy that they need from that perspective, but improves. Is that something, because we talk about these intangible things, leadership, moxie, it factor, blah, 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 blah. But all the things that are in his profile that everyone goes, yeah, he's not it, because we haven't seen those things specifically. And this is an open question, because I don't necessarily know the answer, even looking at the film and watching him and having, I feel like, a detailed understanding of his game. But I guess the open question is, do you think that there is a middle ground for this offense from Andy Kotelnicki, putting him in a better position, him developing where they can get the offense to be more of what they want this upcoming season?
Boy, that is open-ended. Yes. I mean, he won 10 games as a first-year starter. But I think the thing that you said right there in the middle, how much can Andy Kotelnicki put him in position to do things? Like he needs help. Like he absolutely needs help. And there's no shame in that. Like he's not a guy that's going to go out and win a game on his own right now. And, he's going to need that to take them to the next step that they want to get to. And I think that that's receivers, offensive line, play calling, just sort of everything. Drew can't do it on his own, and that's fine. Like, and you got to get past that. Like you got to get past that whole, this quarterback has to be the one that takes us to the promised land. Whereas
the Messiah,
surround him with the right guys. And I think that's entirely possible, but it's so tough with the standard here with people being pissed off coming off of a 10-win season. Like that's tough because we're talking about these little margins that don't exist elsewhere. These little margins that exist at the competition that you're looking to compete with. And that's tough, man. I don't, it's very open-ended because I don't know that there's an answer to that, except everybody's got to help everybody. And that includes Drew helping his teammates and his teammates helping Drew.
One of the things that could help is making the right decision in the right moment, maximizing the offense through more means than the drop back passing game. It was a big part of what Andy Kotelnicki did at Kansas, having the quarterback run the football. There are variations to this offense through time that don't rely as much on the read option, but if you've got it, you might want to use it. And Nate, this is the one thing that I want to pull directly from your conversation. And again, go check out his full answer. But you asked him about running the football. And he gave, I think, a little bit of a surprising answer compared to what people might expect. So what did he say?
He said that I asked him whether or not he's comfortable running the football, how comfortable he is running the football. And he said he's perfectly comfortable running the football, had a big smile as he said it, and effectively said that he doesn't know where the idea came from that he wouldn't be comfortable running the football or that he wouldn't want to run the football. And that before becoming a quarterback in his whatever stage of the game it was for him, Pee-wee, Mighty Mites, what have you,
I think sophomore.
That he was that he was a fullback. He was a fullback as a younger football player. So he's fine with that. Look,
does the fan base know this?
What's that?
I feel like that'll help him in terms of like his Q rating with the fan base.
Only if he comes out with a neck roll.
Okay.
Yeah. So look, go ahead, Nate. Sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say they're this is a conversation that is going to happen this year, right? From September until November, everyone, including us, is going to be talking about the pros and cons, the risks and reward of having a quarterback who you feel extraordinarily highly about putting themselves seemingly at risk running the football. But that will be asked of him. That is something that this offense that Andy Kotelnicki runs and what they like to do, what he likes to do. And James Franklin, let's be honest about this. What James Franklin has held up over the years as an important piece of that college football offense is having a quarterback who it doesn't have to be a 30-yard carry, doesn't have to be a huge deal. But if defenses are keying in on certain things, taking certain things away, you need a quarterback who can pick you up 4 yards. And, I think that they're going to design things for Drew to do that include picking up those 4 yards.
Well, Fitz, it doesn't even have to include a whole lot of hits, because the whole point of it, right, is to get the quarterback in a situation where there isn't a defender to tackle him immediately. So you get maybe those 4 yards, maybe you get 6. It's about taking advantage of the numbers. That does lead to more opportunities to get hurt running the football, but so does dropping back and being in the pocket. So I guess I'm curious about your idea of the risk reward of running the quarterback versus the reality of it.
Maybe you don't get any. Maybe you get 2. That's not the point here. The point is taking that extra defender and making him, like, putting him in conflict. And when that happens, then you get more yards with Nick Singleton. Then you get more yards with Kaytron Allen. I mean, it's not a results-based entity, this quarterback running the ball. Like the amount of yardage he picks up is kind of irrelevant, but the fact that he's able to do that is the thing that matters there.
Nate, anything else you want to share, including maybe when the next part of the conversation is going to come out, and then we'll move on to Nick Dawkins?
Yeah, I had a story over the weekend that you guys can check out in more detail, but very complimentary from Drew toward, yes, the receivers, but specifically, right? I think that this is a part of that conversation that has to be. I get the sense that the fan base wants the unknown thing to become a thing, and I don't think it is. I think what Drew stated very plainly is that Trey Wallace, Julian Fleming, and Liam Clifford are the leaders in that room, and that should say something, and that Caden Saunders and Omari Evans have taken big strides and are valuable and necessary. But once you get to those 5, that's about that. That might be it, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. That is probably going to represent the biggest part of your production. But red meat for you guys, red meat specifically called out Peter Gonzalez and Tysier Denmark as being different and approaching it with a mentality that is older and more mature, right? They've fallen in line. They have picked up the habits quickly. They want to play. They see an opportunity to play, and they are attacking it this summer with that intention. So for whatever it's worth, on your radar for those 2 guys as potentially chipping in there.
Your Honor, no more questions, because that is an entire different show. And Fitz, we've got to get to the conversation about Nick Dawkins, and we've got a meaty mailbag to end the show. Lots of deep questions that I think are quite good. Nick Dawkins has a certain persona around the Penn State football program. I imagine he came off well in your conversation. So what were your takeaways of this latest interaction with Penn State's, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? He's not a team captain, but he is, I think, a leader on the offense, at least from that perspective.
Yeah, unofficial captain, I would say. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to call it a formality, but I think he's going to be one of those guys. Also, by the way, taking me from that red meat of Nate's quarterback story to talking about the center, I appreciate that. It sets me up for success here. No, Nick was great. Nick's always great. He's full of perspective on different things. I asked him, about all the normal stuff this off season, and then I had a conversation with John Urschel 10 years ago, whatever it was, and we were at Big Ten Media Day, and I sat down. I'm like, who's asked you about football today? Like. And he lit up, because everything had been about how smart he is, how, much of a unicorn he was as a student athlete and everything like that. But the guy's a football player. He wants to talk about football, and Nick's the same way. Everything you talk about with Nick is leadership, captain, all, the guy that you want in front of your program. And that's great. And he says his mom loves it. Like it's about, kind of the earmark of who he is as a man. And that's awesome. But
yeah,
this is a guy that wants to be a standout football player. And he says he has the confidence that he can be the best center in the country. We're going to see where that goes. Obviously taking over for, a guy that played a lot of football in Hunter Norzad, taking over eventually, down the line, taking over for Drew Scruggs. Like that's a position that's got a high standard. For a first year starter, it's going to be tough. But I think he's worked his way into it. And we talked all spring about Cooper Cousins potentially taking over that role. And I do think we see Cooper in some of that. Center is such a tough position to platoon, but I think we're going to see some of Cooper in there. But at the same time, that's Nick's spot right now. And I think he's done a good job of sort of roping that back, going into the spring. All of it was talking about Cooper taking over, and Cousins is going to be here 3 years, and that's going to be it for him. Like that's how high the praise was for him. But Dawkins was able to bring that back around and sort of bring his style to his leadership style, his overall blocking style, his communication style, I think is a big thing for him to getting where he needs to be. So I was kind of fascinated by that, because he's like John. He lit up when we talked about football, because that's what he wants to be. He wants to be a football player. John wanted to be a football player, ended up being an all Big Ten football player. So if Nick can get there, that'd be awesome. I think everybody's sort of cheering for him, rooting for him. And then I kind of flipped it on him, and I said, "Hey, how close were you to going to Northwestern?" And I wrote about this over the weekend. Definitely check it out. Because it is relevant right now, like with how Penn State has recruited in state. And of course, it all comes back to recruiting with me. I'm sorry about that. But this was a guy that was at Parkland in Allentown, and everything pointed to Penn State. But he had a bunch of people around him saying, hey, I'm going to Penn State. You should go to Penn State with me. My uncle went to Penn State. You go to Penn State. Everything Penn State, Penn State, Penn State. And they get this mentality, and I'm really seeing it right now in the class of 2025, is that, hey, if everybody expects you to go to Penn State, I'm going to look elsewhere. You see Andrew Olish is looking at Michigan and Alabama right now. I think that's a big thing with him, is like everybody expects him to go to Penn State. I think Lex Cyrus, kind of the same way. Everybody around Susquehanna Township says Penn State's the place for you. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm going to flip that on its head and do what I want to do, or tell myself that I'm going to do what I want to do. Two guys that did this, Julian Fleming and Nolan Rucci. They're on Penn State's roster this year after not being on Penn State's roster for multiple years, going elsewhere and not having success. So I'm really, really interested to see, number one, how much relevance this has in today's cycle, this year's recruiting cycle, because I've seen it a lot. We've seen it a lot. And then the other thing he said, and I've said this on the show a couple of times, is he was salty that he didn't get his offer earlier from Penn State as a Pennsylvania kid. And that's really interesting to me too, because I saw that with Michael Carroll. I saw that with Andrew Olish. You see this with these guys that sort of ascend at some point during the recruitment, and all of a sudden turns on its head, and you're looking for reasons to get out then. And that's kind of what I saw. So I opened up a can of worms with Nick Dawkins. He walked into what I was getting at, but he said it all himself without any follow-up. So I was really, really interested to see that. So check that out if you get it on the site. It's just a unique perspective of how things are going when you are almost too close to the situation. And in Pennsylvania, there's no escaping Penn State. So everybody around you is sort of inadvertently also pushing you away. It's very fascinating.
Right. There's a certain percentage of the 17-year-old male brain that is the same percentage that says my parents are stupid, that also says everyone wants me to do something. Well, I'm going to do the exact opposite because of that reason. And then some people.
And I've seen guys in the last 10 years since, I was at 24/7 when we put the crystal ball in, that like legitimately changed the biggest decision of their life because people think they are going to make that decision. And it's not a situation to set you up for success.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of these deeper conversations. Again, check out all the those articles in the show notes, and then go check it out, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Great reminder, join us for $1, and you get it for 2 months. We are officially into September, when you are going to be getting, I guess the end of August anyway. You'll get the first game of the season to understand how we go through the season, and then you can choose to sign up with code PSU1 for 2 months. You get for just $1. Let's get into the BWI Mailbag. First question here. I love easy questions I can knock out. He says, any update on Olish? Fitz, in that conversation just now, gave you a small update on Andrew Olish. So there you go. There's your update. If you want to hit the rewind button, then there you can go hear what Fitz had to say on repeat. Let's get to our questions here in the mailbag. There's, we always do this because I'm terrible at the clock. Getting to all of these really deep conversations. We could go for 2 hours on some of these things. Let's start with Fitz. I'm coming back to you on this one. Fitz wrote an awesome article over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com talking about the top 5 fastest players on the Penn State roster. Really worth that $1 subscription. This deals with speed. Brian Rintz says, I know Nick Singleton is very fast, but in my opinion, he looked slower. Last year, it looked like he bulked up too much and lost any chance of direction or lateral ability he previously had. What are your thoughts on this, Fitz?
Yeah, I don't think it's speed. I don't think it's weight. I just think it's decisiveness. And I think that his issue is running ahead of himself. Like it's great backs can put their foot in the ground and go. And I think he took a step back last year in that facet of his game. He found those places that, I think he got 3 steps ahead of himself. And then by the time he got to that third step, things had changed, and he had found himself running up on defenders, running up on blockers, doing a lot of those different things, and not
playing with instinct whatsoever.
Not playing with instinct. Yeah. I don't think it's a weight thing. I mean, look, he was 222 last year is what he was listed. He's 226 now. I mean, you look at that kid and it's tough to see where the weight is because he's not
so
look
big.
that big. He's so
Yeah.
just naturally jacked. And I don't think it's a weight thing at all. I think it's up here. And I think that's something that they can help him out with in terms of getting him in space. And I think that's why the switch in coordinators is going to benefit him maybe more than anybody else on the offense, just in terms of getting him in space and having him not have to process that as much. And not saying he can't process it, but when you just catch it and go, like, that's better than catching it, thinking about it and going. And I think that plays to his strengths the most. They use him as a receiver, they get him out of the backfield, just do some things to get him in space.
The results-based part of football, if you look at no explosive runs, Nick Singleton, what's the difference in him? Why didn't he produce those things? And the offense is a large part of that conversation, because you saw at the end of the year when they got him in space a little bit to throw the football to him on screens and things like that, he was explosive. He maybe didn't have the home runs because whatever reason situationally, but you're absolutely right. I chronicled this all last season of his running style specifically, and the situation last year didn't give him the opportunity to hit a lot of home runs because he had to beat a lot of players in a small area through trash in the box. He is an explosive train track sort of guy, and he needed to adapt a little bit, but he was at first and foremost, he was thinking and not reacting to what was in front of him. And I think trying too hard to be right as a running back, where he's good enough, he can make the situation right because he's a freak athlete. But we had this conversation, Nate, about how he was learning football. And last year it felt like that was the conversation. That was what was happening. He was trying so hard to be a good running back that he forgot to be a great athlete in the situation. How do you see, as our resident Nick Singleton specialist, how do you see his junior season progressing?
First of all, how dare you, Fitz, critique young Nick Singleton? No, he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine.
I agree with Nate. Yeah.
He's super special as an athlete. He really has gifts that you can't teach. Worked very hard to gain those gifts. It's not all natural, Fitz. But I think that Andy Koldenicki has the opportunity to put him in better positions than he was last season. But like, again, it becomes easier and easier to talk about last year as time expands and reduce things into easy catchphrases. And Penn State was a one-trick pony last year. There was only one trick, and as soon as defenses figured it out, and they did, which was, hey, let's bottle up Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen, of which Kaytron Allen is absolutely 100% more comfortable running between the tackles and being decisive, making the lemonade out of the lemons, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. But if you have an offensive coordinator who, one, can give you a passing game, which Penn State didn't have last year, with effectiveness, there should be some ramification and some dividend that is produced for the running game. And part of it is, again, included, I do think that they're going to emphasize getting the ball to Nick out of the backfield as a pass catcher. It was a huge component of what he did last offseason, 2 off seasons ago. And you saw his numbers jump because of that in the passing game. People forget Saquon Barkley had like 45, 50 catches in 2017.
Significant.
Bet that can happen again.
I think part of the conversation about Singleton too is, and maybe I'm just rehashing this, but this is a guy who, if you give him the angle to the corner on a safety, he wins. If the safety confronts him at the line of scrimmage, it's not as good of a prospect for Nick Singleton. He's I don't want to say he's a build-up speed player, but I think there is something to that lateral agility that isn't because he got bigger. That's just because of his running style, his body type, etc., where he's not going to be Kaytron Allen and be Gumby, where he can just stop and shift his momentum and his weight. there are ways for him to succeed in those situations. But if the safety has to stay at 8 yards because the passing game is a threat, then you have more of that room. And that's what these guys are saying in terms of opportunity and situation. Let's go on to the next part of this conversation. Fanny Pack Hero, excellent name. Fill in the blank question. We flash forward to the end of 2024, and Andy Kolnicki's offense is a smashing success. The primary reason why his offense succeeded where Mike Yurcich's failed was blank. Fitz.
I didn't read this question correctly. I was going to say stubbornness, but that's about the Yurcich thing. Flexibility, I guess, would be the opposite of that, right? Just the ability to put people in the right spots, and the ability to, I mean, hey, if something's not working, get away from it. Like that, we see this with play callers, and it's not just a Penn State thing. We see this all the time. Is hey, I'm going to make my thing work. I mean, it's really about being flexible with yourself as a coach, and I think he's been able to do that. Like, you've watched more Kansas than I have, but they changed a bunch of things because of the hurdles that were placed in front of them, namely all their quarterbacks getting hurt. Like, they changed a lot of things. So I think flexibility is that. I was going to say stubbornness. Again, I read the question wrong. Stubbornness of protecting Drew from interceptions. I mean, you can coach around that. Like there's thing there. I mean, I'm not saying Drew's got to go out and throw 10 picks this year, but like, hey, aggressiveness helps sometimes. Yeah. Call me crazy.
Especially when you have a good defense. I thought the kind of way that everything operated last year, playing to the defense, I understand it. But I also understand that if you've got a really good defense, you don't want to put them in situations to fail all the time by giving them short fields. But if there's one time to do it, it's when you have an elite defense. Right. Nate, what's your answer to this question?
Explosive play generation.
I like
That's
it.
3 blanks.
It didn't limit my word choice.
Okay.
Also, way to get the buzzwords were all there, Nate. I love that. That is it. That is a trendy answer.
I don't know what it means, but
okay. I was just going to ask you. I was going to ask you a follow-up question of that. Does it have to be all in one area? Does it have to be in both areas, pass and run?
Yeah, it does. It has to be both. They have to find a way to get. Again, that's the Nick conversation as a pass catcher. Yes. Quentin Martin as a pass catcher. Yes. Getting those positions, your shiftiest players, your fastest players, including Omari Evans, including Trey Wallace, getting those guys opportunities to make plays and beat a guy and then win. Right?
Mm-hmm. And catch the ball on the move. Like,
yes.
Very, very simple concept. It's easier said than done. We're 3 guys sitting here on a podcast here. Yeah. But how many times do you see a pass thrown and the guy is starting from a standstill trying to avoid 11-ish defenders? Like, catch the ball on the run.
And also mitigating your, like, there's a certain emphasis on the taking what the defense gave you last year and not being the aggressor. And all the comebacks and underneath routes that Fitz is talking about. It's frustrating to watch last year.
Kolnicki in his interview talked about his excitement about making opponents scared of the players that they have because of their versatility. If you look, and look, we can talk about the receivers all day. Trey Wallace is still a ball of potential. I don't think anybody's arguing that the potential isn't there. Omari Evans is a ball of potential. There are opportunities there out of those guys to do specifically the big play thing, to wrangle those big plays. But guess what? So does Nick Singleton. So does Tyler Warren.
Yep.
Right? Like, you have these different pieces at different areas of the field that can do this for you. Katron Allen's not going to burn anybody for 80, probably not, but he could still get you 20, right? Like,
and 50 at his best. We've seen him do 50
for sure. So it is on the right. Like, the personnel is there. to do some of these things when they are afforded the opportunity. Drew has to make it all work. He has to stir the drink.
Yep.
That is essential, and he needs to be better, particularly in those big games. He knows that. James Franklin knows that. Everybody knows that. But it is not for a complete absence of talent. That's not the situation with this team this year, and it wasn't the situation last year either.
Yeah. This question, Fitz, I'm going to come to you with this one. Fanny Pack Hero back, he says, although there's been an effort to get blazing speed, not all the guys on your list are stars over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on that list. Does absolute speed always equate to football acumen and success? Why or why not? This is an interesting question, the way he phrased it at the end. What's the value or the overvalue of speed?
Oh, that's a better way to ask it. The overvalue of speed. Hey, look, there's a certain amount of guys that can run a certain speed, 4.3, whatever. The part of the first question, there's 120 guys on the roster. So to take out 5, of course, the odds are not great that they're all going to be starters or whatever. And I think that those guys will continue to play, and those guys will continue to be in the mix for starters. Just check that out. But no, I mean, hey, we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot of track guys that come in that can't play football lick. Some of them have varied success. Davon Smith had varied success. Now, it was very little success, and like in the big picture, but there were times when he gets loose and you see a different sort of speed. Penn State wants all the fast guys they can get. I mean, this is not an either or situation either.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at some guys that, like, I didn't expect Davian Collins to be as fast as he can. Well, he's got to be an actual player on the other side. And it sounds like from what we heard this spring that he can be that guy. So I don't know, man, it's not an either or situation. You're going to play with different body types, speed, athleticism, quickness. Like to me, I'm a big shuttle guy. I'm more shuttle than I am 40 guy. Like that to me is the things that I value. Some people see a special guy that has got special speed, and you can make him a kick returner. You can remember Jeff Demps was fantastic at Florida. You can get somebody's just mentioned Drew Hartlob. Like he was a great an elite gunner. Like he was awesome. There are roles for these guys. It's not always the role of guy runs down the field and you throw in the pass because he's faster than everybody. That doesn't work at the D1 level.
Yep. And I also think that part of this conversation is about recruiting, and all the fast guys that are big and tall and have all of the skills, they end up being high 4 and 5-star players. So do you find guys that you can develop that have the speed and need to fill in the blanks of the game? And then the balance, like we're talking about with the receiver class, how do you get the right blend of guys that have an upside, that are going to produce and you feel confident about, and then those high floor players that will come in and set a floor for a particular room? In this case, I'm just specifically pointing out the receivers. Let's move on. We got a couple minutes left. Want to get to some of these questions. We've been talking about the offense. Let's stay on the offense specifically. Valhalla Valley. He brings us up for both of these guys. We talked about this a little bit. I like this question. James Franklin likes to pick coordinators who have prior success with their main focus of why they've been hired. Isn't that canceled out by competition being better in the Big Ten? For example, Andy Kolnicki got a lot out of his offensive players at Kansas, some 3-star players that he coached a higher level, but they played against Big 12 defenses. He has better athletes now, but you're playing against better athletes. So how does that come out on the other side, Nate Bauer?
I don't think there's a right answer to this. Well, first, a couple of things. One, T-Frank, this was your question for me to ask all of the coordinators and James Franklin, and I did. And James Franklin, of those guys, James Franklin, I think, offered the most eloquent perception, maybe is how I would frame it, in that he said, if you look at everyone on the staff, for the most part, and just in the game of, like, everyone is coming from somewhere less prestigious than the place that they end up when you end up at the highest levels. Everyone. That's how it works. That's how you climb the ladder. So the idea of doing more with less is a fundamental element of personnel usage throughout football as you're coming up the ranks. That's that's how you make a name for yourself. But what Franklin said was it's about harnessing that creativity and that spirit while understanding that there are fewer risks that you might need to take, right? And also, I mean, maybe the best thing that he said all day was Penn State still has that in a couple of games a year. And at this point, I am paraphrasing on his behalf, but he's saying, yeah, you do. Penn State is going to have better players in a bunch of games that they play every year. But I think that we can all look at a couple of games over the last couple of years where they didn't, or where it was more evenly matched, or Penn State was just a little bit lesser. And you still have to have that ingredient in how you approach your game planning for those matchups. So, is it canceled out? No, I don't think so. I think it's an ingredient that those guys, that James Franklin at least, prizes and values in his coordinators as they come up. Joe Moorhead.
Yeah. I would also point out, and this is something I wrote about in kind of the same context, but in a different avenue, is Ohio State hired Jim Knowles out of the Big 12, who has a unique defense built to stop things in the margins, not necessarily a traditional way of playing defense. Fitz, and they're trying to do more with more, right? So Fitz, I guess, how do you view this conversation?
I think it's a legitimate point that's being made. Like you look at the tape of Big 12 defenses, they're not as fast in sort of the second level. And I think that's where a lot, if you take a look at those full game footage, like a lot of missed tackles in there, a lot of intermediate passes that go for big gains. And I think you see less of that in the Big 10. The Big 10 does a nice job of keeping things in front of them better than the Big 12 defense does. So I think that there's a point to be made there.
Yeah.
Now that you have better athletes, and I see somebody made a point that I was going to make about the Buffalo game, he's moved the ball when he's been playing better teams. They move the ball against Texas. They move the ball, and I know it's Big 12 teams, or former Big 12 teams now, but they've moved the ball against more talented defenses, and it's just a matter of falling off because they didn't have the depth, they didn't have the line and the upfront play and things like that. I think he's kind of got that at Penn State now, so he's going to have the opportunity to get there. But I'm not writing it off. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. But I think that this is an opportunity for him to create more with more. We say more with less because we're really down in that receiver room, but there's a lot of talent on this roster. And I think that's what we keep going back to. And, again, it's not going to be good enough except for Ohio State. I know Michigan's not on the schedule, but that's where he's going to be judged. We're going to talk about these 9 games and almost throw them to the side can as if they don't exist sometimes, which is horrendously stupid. But that's kind of what we're working through here, and we won't know until they get the top teams on the schedule.
All right, so unfortunately, we're not going to get to all the questions. Hopefully, we can get to them at a later date, or we can answer them over at bluewhiteillustrated.com on the message board, where we have an infinite amount of time and text to get into some of the nuance here in these conversations. Appreciate everybody who subscribed and asked a question at the Blue White Illustrated message board. Great way to get on the show is to join us and then throw your question into the mailbag submission thread, which I put up Monday nights. Depending on if I forget or not, it's 8 o'clock to 9:30, 9:45. Hopefully I don't fall asleep and do it at 11. Nate, what's coming up from you this week at bluewhiteillustrated.com as we head into the holidays?
Interview week. Nate Bauer's interview week. So lots of Q&As with all of the people that you mentioned. So Andy Kotelnicki, Tom Allen, Pat Kraft, and Drew Allar. I will have full interviews with all of those guys on the site this week.
We're going to be doing something with a recruiting show this week. Don't know quite yet if it's going to be tomorrow or if we're going to do something truncated or something, but it's 4th of July on Thursday. I'm not going to be working that day. So Fitz, what's coming up from you this week?
Yeah, we'll figure that out. I put in an RPM pick just on a story before I came onto the show, so check that out. But yeah, there's still things to be done with the nice graphic. Things to be done with recruiting as Penn State sort of moves. I think the first half of July is still going to be active, and then you get into the latter part of the dead period, and then back at the end of July with some Lash Bash stuff. So it's not going away. So check out that offer on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You will not find Penn State coverage like we're putting out there. I really implore you to check that out.
Love it. Please join us. We love the conversation. We love to continue it. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. We will be back tomorrow. We'll talk to you then.